Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you may be listening to. Welcome back to the Padres EVT Podcast. This is episode number 181. This is your host, Diego Garcia, staff writer for East Village Times, along with editor-in-chief and founder of the East Village Times, James Clark. And we are very excited. We have a very special guest on today. Longtime listeners, you may be familiar with him, Mr. Eric Longenhagen of FanGraphs Prospect Analysis. When it comes to prospects, he's the man. Eric, how are you doing today?
Pretty good, guys. How are you?
Not too bad. Baseball's in the air, right? I mean, it's a good time of the year.
Yeah, indeed. Actually had Padres White Sox on in the little bit of time between when I got home from like a bike ride and hopping on the pod, just because the White Sox arms that went today were pretty good. So,
oh, okay,
a lot of
got
fun.
some interesting arms there. Speaking of arms, we sure got some interesting arms here, so we'll go ahead and get right into it. Starting out with the San Diego Padres and their organization, this is a team that has a lot of turnover in their prospect system from year to year. We know AJ Preller likes to make a big deal or two. What do you make of the system in general as it stands right now?
It's a below average overall system. So much of it is just because of their willingness to move prospects, not even necessarily good ones all the time. I thought the Tanner Scott deal was more about volume than quality, but just with the two big guys up top and then several high upside youngsters littered throughout the org. The high school pitchers from last year's draft, Humberto Cruz, pitcher out of Mexico, Cobb Hightower, high school player from North Carolina. And those guys, have a chance, I think, over time to be the next wave of like everyday guy or above, that type of, player impact. But they don't do a great job of developing guys. And so the depth of the system, especially on the pitching side, they don't really grow their own so well in San Diego, where like the Yankees and the Dodgers and the Guardians are taking small school college arms and turning them into usable middle relievers. Like that's a big win when you can do that at scale. And the Padres just really haven't shown an ability to do that. But I do think, as far as pieces that might impact the big league roster this year, a lot of them are on the pitching side, more in the bullpen. Guys who are, rookies still, prospects still, who maybe have a chance to either break camp with the big club or at some point during the season have an impact out of the bullpen. That's really what I think this season is about as far as the Padres farm system is concerned.
Yeah, you think that's Preller's MO as far as draft, to kind of draft high upside kind of guys and kind of try to move them later on for parts for the major league team? I mean, that seems like his formula, right?
Yeah, I think that they want A and B grade players at as many positions as they possibly can. And I guess that separates them from other major league orgs in a way. There are definitely teams like the Rays who are willing to have like C grade players pair with one another so that they get like B level production out of those guys. Because they're constantly being put in position to succeed. Where Josh Lowe and Manny Margot are like Voltroned together to be a 3-win player. The Padres are looking to have a single guy who can do that on his own. And if it means, like whether it's players who we on the public side or the industry at large are too high on relative to what the Padres think they are, I think they're looking to move those guys. I think they're looking to sell high on those guys, the Robbie Snellings of the world. I think they're happy to, pump and dump those prospects as a stock of sorts. And if it means that they're getting someone who they know to be good, they're absolutely going to do that. I think sometimes they get a little over their skis as far as how much they want to pay those players and for how long. And the Xander Bogaerts deal does not feel good. The Manny Machado deal has gone well so far, so it's like a mixed, it's a mixed bag. But when you're in the situation you're in with ownership, it's hard to wear a deal like the Bogaerts contract for another 5 years without it really, hurting the rest of your organization. There's collateral damage as a result of that, especially when you don't have a depth-based approach to building your farm system, you wear that on the chin in a way that I think can be tough to recover from. But they're damn good at picking players. They're really good at picking guys with in the late first, second round who have potential to grow and become legit impact big leaguers. But when you look at their lineup, it is mostly guys who they traded for or who they signed, other than Jackson Merrill. So you can pretty clearly, I think, see what the organizational strategy is.
For sure. I mean, there's very few homegrown Padres on this roster right now, and there's really nobody up and coming other than like a Tirso that might step up and be a role player, if you will. But it seems like Preller's formula is to kind of put a pretty bow on his prospects and kind of package them to other teams. And I can't complain too much because I've been a Padre fan for a long time, and I've seen this team really just not draft well, and then not even draft players out of the international market, which they're actually doing now, which is awesome to see. Salas and DeVries back-to-back years is a positive thing for this organization.
Yeah, I think they really embolden Chris Kemp, who's their amateur director on in both markets. And why wouldn't you? I can't imagine the undertaking. I've got to cover all these markets on my own, essentially, for the website, and it's a real challenge. And I'm not trying to do, I understand what my blind spots are going to be when I'm trying to do a job like this at scale. I'm not sitting in a kid's living room vetting his personhood or calling kids guidance counselors or stuff like that to see what kind of player I might be sticking my neck out to give $2 million or more to.
Right.
I'm
there's just so many. There's so many players, right? You cover such a wide array of players and different levels and stuff in 30 teams, so it's tough. But let's talk about Ethan Salas. I know someone that you liked really well, someone that 2 years ago you saw at 16 years old just kind of tearing up the backfields. Give me your thoughts on Salas and the regression he showed last year, and if that's something to be concerned about if you're a Padre fan.
Yeah, I'm not really concerned. I mean, if what you were hoping for was that this guy was going to be Alex Rodriguez except a catcher, then maybe you're disappointed. But Ethan's numbers really weren't any different under the hood than Adley Rutschman's freshman year at Oregon State. You know what I mean? He was at high A, so there are some things about Ethan's swing that seem like they won't really work. That he's going to be vulnerable to a certain subset of well-executed pitches. But I think that's okay. I think there's still going to be, for a catcher, just so much left-handed power. I think you've seen it already this spring, that Oppo gap double. That's going to be a signature of his. He's going to do that 30 times a year and play really, really excellent defense back there. He's still so young. He's still so big. I really think that he's going to continue to grow into more and more power and be a pretty special defender. And so, I'm still very, very positive about what Ethan's going to be able to do. It's probably just going to take some time. I think the comp I put on him in the report this year is Jason Hayward, where there's some big years where he's a 4 or 5 win player, and then other years where there's a frustrating lack of power. But overall, such an amazing, good player. And so, I still really, really like Ethan, and just think that any teenage catcher, takes time, and he's so, he's going to be very, very good.
Right. On the same vein, we know that Ethan was the highest signee for the Padres in 2023. And in 2024, they did the same thing again with signing Leodalis DeVries. What are your thoughts on him from what you've seen, if you've seen him play? And just because we've saw the double he hit the other day, but for those of us who are, either new to prospect analysis or not quite as familiar with Leo's game, what's your assessment there?
Yeah, I like Leo a lot too. Little less certainty, I think, about where he settles defensively. Whereas Ethan, I feel pretty confident, is going to be a very good catcher. DeVries, whether he stays at short, I think is just going to depend on how he develops physically. His range right now is like a little bit short of what is ideal there, but some of his other skills, just his hands, his arm strength, just his feel for the position, body control stuff. He'll make some acrobatic throws and make up for like a general lack of range compared to some of these other, like the Carson Williamses of the world and guys like this who we're talking about like monster plus range and overall defense. And to have like a viable shortstop who has power from both sides, that's a good thing. So, I think overall Leo, I think I ranked him somewhere close to 30th overall. Yeah, 37th. He's stacked with a bunch of middle infielders on my top 100 who are like, who would be most years in the mix for the top couple of picks in a draft. Really, really like him and think there are going to be strikeouts, but he's going to access power and either play shortstop in a way that is fine or third base or second base in a way that is very special. And that's a really good, build around everyday player.
Yeah. So with Leo and Ethan kind of being the next wave, you mentioned earlier that a lot of the Padres' near reinforcements are on the pitching side. Like, so if we're looking at guys who would be called up in 2025, who are the arms you would say are you would put on a, maybe not a certainty, but you would say like these guys are very likely because they added a trio of guys with Ryan Burgett, Omar Cruz, and then Henry Baez to the 40-man. Who do you think is the most likely to make a major league impact?
Yeah, I think probably Cruz. Lefties with good changeups, they just tend to be something, even if that something is just like Tommy Malone. And so I think we saw last year some of the problems that Randy Vasquez and Yanni Brito have with their fastball playability. Cruz in the bullpen, even stretched out in a multi-inning capacity like he was for a lot of last year. At times, starting, especially late, they sort of moved him back more into like a piggyback role late.
Yeah.
He was like working an inning or three at a time early, and then late it was more like 3, 4, a time or two there were 5, 6 innings. So maybe he has, just at this point been stretched out as a starter again. But anytime you get a lefty with a real changeup, that guy's going to be something. I think that's pretty clear here. That's what they've got. Burgert for me has always been more of like a pretty standard fastball slider relief look.
Okay.
The last couple of years he's had, 100 innings at a shot, just having that part of it, guy who for 3 consecutive years has worked 100 innings. That's an important thing for the way I look at pitching. Guys who have demonstrated durability, I think that's nice. But yeah, how that shakes out with the guys who only have one option year left, Vasquez, Waldron, Yanni Brito, versus the group that is a little bit more stuff heavy. That's Cruz. That's Juan Nunez, the Rule 5 pick from Baltimore. That's Bradley Rodriguez, who I think is more pure relief. And Juan Nunez probably is too. But like that's the group where Braden Nett, is more on the starter reliever line. We'll see. Henry Baez, I think, is really interesting because he checks a lot of boxes in terms of his size. It's just not monster stuff. Like I've got Henry Baez as more of like average across the board, average command. I like him as an up down like depth starter with a chance to grow into a back end guy. Okay. He's still just so young. But I think that group is deep, and that you've got enough guys who can play a role that injuries, even if they bite the big league roster, which they're likely to, because just pitching at the big league level, you just need so much depth throughout a season. Right. Between, bringing in Kyle Hart and Pivetta, and having all these guys with options on the 40-man, we just talked about, it's another like 8 guys, I think, right. Before we even get to the Braden Nets and the, Bradley Rodriguez's. Yeah, Isaiah Lowe, another, fairly interesting guy. Francis Pena is not on the 40-man.
Right.
Really
what do you make of Pena? sorry to cut you off, but what do you make of Pena? Because he seems to have a high upside to him as a high leverage type of reliever. Very young still, but shows that the tremendous fastball and stuff. I'm interested to see what you make of him at this point.
Yeah, it was tough to run him down in the fall league. He was one where like people were hoping to run into him, and his deployment was a little bit scattered.
Okay.
So yeah, I think he's interesting. That group, if like you're looking at the reports from last list cycle, so for the Padres, I'm pretty sure that was like in May or June or something like that.
It's July, I think. I was reading that one.
So yeah, like the 40 plus designation that I give Francis Pena, that's a higher upside. Like the third banana in a good bullpen type of guy.
Mm-hmm.
His fastball, Pena's I think had 2 outings this spring. I made sure to like put on the spring outings here this week, make sure that we saw everything before hopping on the pod. And he's sitting 94, 97, and it's just not with great like rise run action. It's more like a tailing fastball, and we're just going to see how that plays. But yeah, it was 4 to 8 last year, touching 9. If I'm pulling up the data from last season on the secondary stuff, just like opening up my spreadsheet here to see, I think he's on that line where if you told me he was going to be a pretty stock middle reliever, I'd believe you. And if you told me that there's an additional gear here that would allow him to play more of a high leverage role, like a good bullpen 7th inning guy, I'd believe you too. So yeah, like sitting 94.5 with a fastball. Some of them, there's a cutter here. There's a pure fastball. Cutter's more like 90, 92, touch of 3. And finding like a swing and miss secondary that's slower than that is just, there's not one here yet. He's all fastballs and cutters.
Okay.
There's not like a 40 plus miss rate pitch here that you would want out of like a lock late inning bullpen guy, but to have a cutter that's, generating chase and miss north of 30%, like that's good. That's about average, maybe a tick above for a big league cutter.
Okay.
And so, yeah, it's, mid to upper 90s fastball with an average cutter. And let's see, what else they can do with it. But I agree with you. Just like scouting guys, pitchers especially, because of the way they're built, because of the way they move. That's a big deal. That's as much about longevity as it is upside.
Yeah.
And it's just about finding a plus secondary pitch for a guy like that, where it's just not there right now. But when you look at the way Francis Pena is put together and the way he moves, he's probably going to throw this hard consistently for a very long time. And it's just about finding something else that clicks.
Yeah, no, I hear you. There's upside there. There's ability, and it's just about him finding the next level, if you will. Let's move on to another pitcher that we haven't really talked about yet, and that's Victor Lizarraga. Fastball velocity kind of ticked up a little bit this past season. I know you were a little skeptical on his future, maybe a lower end rotation type of guy. Has that changed at all on Lizarraga with him showing a little bit of more of a fastball?
Not really. I'm just okay on Victor Lizarraga. I think he's fine. Definitely more of a back end starter type for me.
Okay.
There have been peaks of velocity, but I still have his 4-seamer is like sitting 90, 92 mostly last year. Just kind of a generic back end guy. And again, looking at some of the other stuff in the data, his curveball still good, and the rest of the other stuff is okay. Whether, I'm just peeking at this data, and whether what I'm looking at is a curveball and a sweeper together, or if one of them, the TrackMan is auto tagging because they're like curveballs that weren't released as well.
Okay.
It's not really clear, but yeah, like I understand why they signed Victor Lizarraga. I think that they've got a great pipeline of Mexican talent. Those Diablos Rojos guys, the Padres seem to be the first ones on those guys pretty consistently. I really like Humberto Cruz long-term more than I like Victor Lizarraga, who's just sort of like a perfectly okay depth arm for me. Humberto Cruz checks all the, it's just he's so much more graceful and prototypical and athletic, and has the sort of fastball carry and traits like that I'm looking for with a starter whose fastball can really, really play. Lizarraga strikes me as one of those guys who he might get hyped elsewhere. And my concern is that if the sources who are being leaned on during the reporting for that process are within the org, that we're talking about the pump and dump thing where it's like, how can we inflate the value of our guys to trade them? And part of it is, well, some of the public facing prospect rankings are definitely part of teams, their inputs in teams models, or, teams who care about the optics of a trade might want, oh, well, the prospects we got back from the Padres were ranked here, and there, or, whatever it is. And, I try to have my own opinion about these guys as much as I can. And with Lizarraga, he's just okay. And that was how I felt about Robbie Snelling too, where I was just like, no, this guy's not for me. I get why they liked him. The Padres, he's a tough kid. I love the kid more than I did his stuff. And the Marlins in those trades just seems like the Marlins care about getting volume back to try to build depth as fast as possible during this initial part of their rebuild. And but yeah, like these guys, their stuff is just okay. The big leagues, man, like you know what it's like when it's you're going from Cease to Tanner Scott to Robert Suarez. Like you got to be so nasty. You have to be so nasty. And that's just not Victor Lizarraga.
Okay, fair enough. That's why I love talking to you, because you give it to us straight, and that's honestly what we need to hear.
Yeah. I think it paints a great picture from someone who isn't, closely following the organization like on a day-to-day basis like we do. Yeah. And so I know there's a lot of pitchers that, we can go on about. I want to get real quick your thoughts on Braden Ned. This is a guy like I've bought in on over the last year, just watching his development from a guy with 2+ pitches, and now he's really, building out that starter's arsenal. What do you see with him? Because I think I caught a little bit of flack for where I ranked him. I ranked him probably higher than some people would. And I'll learn to be honest.
It's okay. Like with Braden Net, it's one of those where, and I know somebody texted me about Net on Sunday. I was just trying to see if they sent me stuff metrics or anything like that. But yeah, with Net, it's monster arm strength and like above average potential secondary stuff. And he's young and he's built the way you want your pitchers who are dev projects to be built and move. It's just about finding mechanical consistency enough to start, the right tail outcomes are that this guy does enough to start. And the more middle of the road outcomes are that this guy who's sitting in the mid 90s and like touching 7 and 8 as a starter in the bullpen, what does that mean for how hard he's throwing? Yeah. And I think it's totally fine, towards the back of, if you're looking at my top 100 prospects across the whole minors and just looking at that 50 future value tier for pitchers, I just have, mostly the guys who I'm very confident as starters at the front of that group, and the guys who I'm not confident are starters, but I'm confident if they aren't will be impact relievers at the back of that group. And Braden Ned is just a version of that with less robust, 3-4+ pitches, like a Chase McDermott or a George Klassen. Ned is the arm strength piece of this is definitely there, and the breaking ball piece of it is occasionally there. If the command comes and if a third pitch comes, then you're talking about a mid-rotation starter. And the fact that he has that potential at all is a good thing. More realistically, one of those two things will develop and he'll be a flawed starter with enough command to start, or he'll be a really good reliever because the secondary stuff developed, but the command did not. And that still is great. Like for an undrafted guy, it's a huge win. So, 5.5 walks per 9 last year across 65 innings. That's not great, but for a guy who in 2022, it was his second full season of pro baseball, that's okay. And now this is the big year for him, right? Because this is the 40-man platform year. They have to decide with Ned at some point this season what to do with regard to him being on the 40-man or exposed to the Rule 5 draft at the end of next year. And sometimes when teams are faced with that, what they decide to do is, all right, the last for, August and September, let's see what this guy looks like in the bullpen. And especially considering that Net has only thrown, 60, 65 innings maximum, plus whatever backfield action, during instructs or whatever. Like, we're probably looking at a guy who's maxed out at 80 innings, right? So this year we would expect Net would max out around 100 innings. And if he breaks camp as a starter with an affiliate, which he should, he's pitching right now, with the big league team a little bit, we'll probably get 100 innings out of him. And maybe in August, September, or during fall league or whatever it is, the team says, let's just see what this looks like when he's airing it out with 2 pitches in the bullpen. And maybe you do that clandestinely so that, scouts from whoever, the Rays or whatever, aren't seeing what he looks like as easily in the bullpen. And if you really like what he's bringing to the table, you put him on the 40-man and know that the beginning of 2026, there's a chance that you cut bait pretty early and just put him in the bullpen because you like what you see there and think he could contribute to the big league club right away. So, we're sort of in that area now where he's on the line, starter reliever. He hasn't progressed super, super fast as a starter, but in 2023, he was walking 8 per 9. And now we're down to like 5 per 9. So that's, he's trending in the right direction. It's just about, this is the big, big year where it's like, all right, now at some point we have to make a decision soon, what we think this guy's going to be. And so we're going to learn a whole lot about Braden Net over the next 6 months. And I think you're right to be excited about him. He's absolutely the type of guy, if you were working for another team scouting the Padres system, who are you looking for value that hasn't been captured yet, that maybe the team doesn't know what they have, or, this is what happened with River Ryan, where, and I was, I saw River Ryan on the backfield and I was standing right behind AJ. And so AJ saw it too. Like, I'm sure they liked River Ryan and just figured they needed a guy like Matt Beattie to be depth right now. But the Dodgers plucked a guy who was on the come, it was an arrow up guy. And they were right about that. And absolutely, Braden Net could be somebody like that. But this is for sure the big, big year.
Yeah, it is.
It really puts into perspective just how much that final stretch of performance means for a young player. And speaking of young players, the Padres this year had a very interesting draft where they went their traditional high school lefty first rounder, and they backed it up with another high school lefty in the second round. So, yeah, I'm not sure how much you've been able to see like every one of their draft picks, but from the ones that you notice, what sticks out to you about guys like Cash Mayfield and Boston Bateman and even some of the position players that they picked up?
Yeah, I mean, Cobb Hightower is the one where my error bar is biggest. He's definitely the one who I have seen the least of that group. He was not as present on the high school, showcase circuit, which again, when you're just doing this at the scale that I'm trying to do, seeing the high schoolers in as efficient fashion as possible is just mandatory. And so with Hightower, he was in, Chris Kemp's backyard in North Carolina. So I'm sure that Kemp has seen a ton of him.
Okay.
But yeah, I like Cobb Hightower the little bit I have seen. My notes are pretty basic, just athletic shortstop fit, hands and actions to play the position are there. Explosive hands in the batter's box with feel for the barrel, but messy stride direction, below average feel for contact overall. Just a toolsy but risky developmental project.
Okay.
They gave him $850K. So I think, that's a pretty good low-level flyer type guy. Those players who teams give a little less than $1 million in the mid rounds of the draft, they can turn out into Logan O'Hoppe. They can turn into, the way Zaire Hope is trending. Very, very good. To give, guys $1 million or so and get something out of them. And that's what Cobb Hightower is. We're just going to kind of see on him. We're going to see on Cale Fountain, who is more of like a righty power corner bat. Cale Fountain, high schooler from Nebraska, super projectable body. He was announced as a third baseman. My infield notes on him from stuff like the combine have him more in the outfield.
Okay.
Just not a very good defensive infielder for me.
Okay.
But above average arm strength, so it's right field. I think they should run him out at third base and see how it goes, and then start mixing in the outfield, first base if it's not looking good over there. But the offensive profile here is like it's pretty traditional corner power body projection guy, plus raw already. With the chance that it's plus at physical maturity. So
Right.
like both of those guys, and you could see like this strategy as we're talking about how many teams come away from a draft class with 4 high upside high schoolers, sort of what they did last year with those 2 hitters. And then Boston Bateman and Cash Mayfield. Mayfield, Elk City, Oklahoma. They gave him $3.5 million.
Yeah.
Had a 6-tick velocity bump across the 12 or so months leading up to the draft. So sitting mid 90s in his best outings.
Mm-hmm.
Who was the pitcher who they drafted a couple years ago out of Texas?
Kevin Kopp. Was it Kevin Kopp?
No, it was a high school kid.
Justin Lang.
Justin Lang. So Justin Lang is another one where the velocity exploded, in the months leading up to the draft. And that was all that was sort of ever there. And so like, there's a chance that's what happens with Mayfield, where the velo is coming. It's coming. And it's coming in part because you get to pitch once a week,
Right.
right. For 2.5 months. And now, like with Noble Meyer, who the Marlins drafted, Noble Meyer sat 91 all year last year because just being a pro pitcher is so different than being a high school kid. But yeah, like I had Cash Mayfield stuffed. I thought he was a good pick where they got him. I absolutely, would have given him $3.5 million. Has that Cole Hamels thing going on where the body is like that, the delivery is like that. Super balanced lower body, big comfortable stride down the mound, like all the Cole Hamels stuff. That's just that beautiful,
smooth delivery.
Yeah, late arm stroke, very deceptive, sells the changeup. Really like the action on the changeup and the arm speed, and think that's the foundation of this guy's mix is, can the velocity stay the same? And we have a changeup here, and then just breaking ball is not great, same as Hamels. Cole Hamels had to develop a cutter late because his curveball was just okay. It looked pretty, but just didn't have a lot of power to it. And that's again like what we're looking at here. So let's find a cutter for this guy. Let's see how the breaking ball trends. Velocity wise, will there be a harder like sweeper type thing? Let's just see. But really great 2-pitch foundation, and the delivery looks right and the body looks right and all that stuff. So that's good. And then Boston Bateman is in that like freak territory, 6'8", 240.
Right.
The line that starts his scouting report from last year is that this guy's built like the drawbridge of a medieval Transylvanian castle at a hulking 6'8".
Oh boy.
So, Sean Manaea is the body comp I put on Boston Bateman. More low 90s, 91, 95, peaking above. Curveball shape, but it's like a bullet style slider in terms of what he's like doing on release. And so, just like an inning, more like an inning eater, back end type guy with just really consistent for 6'8", at his age, teenage guy that big to throw strikes the way he does is exciting. But, 240-pound guys aren't the types who you look back on and say, oh, at 18, he was sitting 92, but now at 21, he's sitting 95. Like, not really. Like this guy's frame is already kind of maxed out. So, little less variance for me. And it's possible that, I'm underappreciating something about his delivery that could change and maybe unlock something there. But just for me, on the surface, projecting on the body for pitchers is how you project on the velocity. And when guys are built like Jake DeGrom and they move like Jake DeGrom, those are the ones where it's like, holy cow, he's 30 and he's still doing this. And that's not what we're talking about here with Boston Bateman. It is more what we're talking about with Cash Mayfield though. So Bateman I have more as like, inning eating back end guy. But yeah, it was a good draft class. I thought Kavaris Tears, the right fielder from Tennessee, again, is like, he's a tool shed. I don't think he's going to hit. He was at the bottom of that group for me.
Okay.
Tyson Neighbors, the reliever from Kansas State, really like him. Got a chance to talk to Tyson Neighbors at the combine a little bit. What a great kid he seems to be. Oh my gosh. And his slider's vicious and could be a middle inning piece, I think, pretty fast. But yeah, I thought they had a really nice draft last year, as they tend to. But this was more fun because they mixed in upside with depth. Like, to have 5 guys like who we can talk about like this and be excited about, even though we're sort of acknowledging where stuff might go sideways, just because you're a high school pitcher, like that in and of itself is, a risky thing. But yeah, man, like I thought the staff did a great job again.
Yeah, no, Preller and Kemp in particular, they do a great job of evaluating their own players, which is awesome because you see them sell high on someone like Snelling, like you say, who's probably not as projectable as most people think, and they just kind of package him and put a nice little red bow on him and send him somewhere else. So you got to give kudos to the Padres for that and thinking outside the box in that regard. Let's move on to someone who's kind of, this is his year or expected to be his year, and that's Eggy Rosario with no minor league options left. He's doing well in camp right now. Looks to be trying to earn a bench job, if you will, a utility role type of thing. What have you seen from Eggy Rosario over the years that impresses you about him?
Yeah, I think Eggy's just a rock solid, like, I think the thing that was most amazing is how quickly they were promoting him initially, right, and how well he was doing initially. And it's easy to get fatigued by guys like that. In Eggy's case, like, there are issues, he's a 70% or so contact guy. And that's not great, but there's enough power there that if he's going to play all over the infield, he's still going to be a useful player, a useful multi-positional player, I think. I think I don't know that you ever want to take the bat out of Jake Cronenworth's hands or whatever, but just like having a righty option to pair with Cronenworth, to pair with Ornelas, it's just going to be a good thing, especially Eggy being versatile, allowing Bogarts to take a day off now and then, I just think it's going to be a good thing to keep Luis Arraez fresh, to keep Bogey fresh, to keep, Tirso from facing too many lefties or whatever it is. I think that we'll look up at the end of the year and Eggy will have had like 400 pretty productive plate appearances as a part-time multi-positional player.
Nice.
Is he with the team, this is Padres nomenclature. It's pretty consistent now across baseball. I would say, I don't know, maybe like half the teams would use this nomenclature rather than like future value or OFP. Is Eggy a C1? Like, I've got more of a C2 on Eggy, but you gotta have guys like that on him, on your roster. And
for sure.
And yeah, I think Zips, our projection system at the site, loves Eggy. Like,
really
thinks that if you were to give him, 450 plate appearances, Zips projects him to be a 2-win player. I think some of that is happening on defense. But yeah, like, to me, that's an overprojection. But if you're more of a projection system, baseball fan rather than an eyeball scouting baseball fan, then you're allowed to like Eggy more than I do. I think that's fine.
For sure. We mentioned Tirso a little bit. Let's talk about him. Someone who started off really high in the organization, had a lot of value, it seemed. The swing was really beautiful initially, and then he went through a little bit of a rough patch. Was productive last year, but that is in the PCL with El Paso, which you kind of a grain of salt with those numbers. Give me your thoughts on Tirso's overall ability and whether he can potentially be an everyday player in the major leagues.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of guys who have a window where they're good for 3 years, give or take. Even if we look at their career as a whole, those like 5-6 years before they hit free agency. And, it's tough to rank them among the Vottos and Rizzos and Goldschmidts. Like, players like that are on a different level. But, guys like Justin Bohr and Jesus Aguilar and Luke Voigt and, these are Garrett Cooper. Like, they have this 3-year window where they're roughly average players at their position, even when that position is first base, left field. And I think that we're in that window for Tirso now. He's 25. Okay. There's stuff about Tirso's game that is, does not allow him to get to all his power. He is a little bit more chase prone than you want him to be. He does not elevate the baseball quite as much as you want him to, but he still overall is a good hitter. I think he's positioned pretty well. His swing there are limitations to his swing for sure, but part of what he succeeds at is those, top side fastballs. Like, he can snatch those with power, and there are a lot of those in the big leagues. Like, these low ball lefty hitters who struggle to get on top of some of those high fastballs, there are lots of righties who live up and away from lefties at, 95 plus miles an hour, like a lot of them. And Tirso should be able to, I think he's going to be able to deal with those guys. Okay. So I think he's going to be good. I think that how long he's good. And, when you look at when you're comparing his numbers at the end of the year to Kyle Schwarber and guys like that, like, he's going to be down the pecking order of first base, DH, left field type guys, closer to the 30 to 40, range of those types of players. But that's okay. At, the league minimum, and paired with someone who hits right-handed like a Connor Joe, so that, I think it's going to be good. I think that he's exactly the kind of player that the Padres need in this moment to be, part of their lineup for 450 or so plate appearances. Like, I think it's going to be good for Tirso, and like some of the expected numbers, again, like some of this is proprietary. Everyone can go to the Baseball Savant, like minor league StatCast search and get numbers like this to some extent. But Tirso's like expected slugging and all that stuff, like it's pretty favorable. His expected ISO, his expected slug. It's exciting. So I think that he's going to have a window here over the next 2, 3, 4 years where he's rock solid, most of the time platoon guy at DH, first base, left field, the bottom of the spectrum, basically.
All right. So there's quite a few position players that we've gone over that are major league ready. And I know this next question is a bit, I've got 2 short ones that are kind of tied together. Outside of the guys who are on the 40-man or on the top prospect list, who are some guys who wouldn't make a conventional top 30 list that you think would be able to make an impact as of right now? Because I remember when researching this, don't know if you've heard of Jared Kolar. He was pitching for them at AAA, another undrafted guy sitting in the low 90s. What were your thoughts on, I don't know if you heard of him, but any thoughts there?
Yeah, so that's a good question. What's funny is like this system is light enough that, because I don't do just 30, like I'll just do however deep the system is. And sometimes that's like 50 some guys, and sometimes that's like 20 some guys. Yeah. And the system is like shallow enough that it is on the low end of that group where I had like, after graduations last year, like a little under 30 guys. In Kolar's case, I can walk you through what I would do right now if you want. The undrafted guys, you said he ended the year at AAA. So let's see. How do you spell his last name? Is it Kol?
Kollar. Yeah.
Okay. Double A. So 83 innings, 26 years old, 29 games, 23 starts, 130 innings, 7 walks per 9, or 7 Ks per 9, 2.5 walks per 9. So now, actually, let me see if I can screen share with you guys real quick so you can see what I'm looking at.
Okay. I think you should be able to.
Yeah. And then we'll just make sure that I'm doing... Can it share the whole entire screen? Yeah. All right. So just forgive the fact that there's like going to be a duplicate here for a sec.
It's all right.
Okay. And now, all right. So this is Synergy Sports. This is like a software tool that I use to help break down players. It was something that we brought into the fold at FanGraphs like during the pandemic. And so I'm going to search for Jared Kolar and pull up video from his 2024 season. And while that's loading, I'm also going to look at my pitch data. And so here's pitch data that I'll source from contacts throughout the course of a season. Okay. Sometimes I'll pool data with other prospect writers. Kylie McDaniel and I typically will pool data. I forget if I did pitchers from 24 end of year or if I did hitters. So they're all just like, alphabetical here. So Kolar is right here. And so some of the key columns that I'm looking for, this is, we've got overall and I've got pitch by pitch, some of the stuff as well. You can just see like here in terms of the raw number of pitches of each type. A lot of cutters from this guy. Way more cutter heavy here than he is throwing four seamers. He's almost got a perfectly due north arm slot. I'm looking at like the axial tilt of these pitches.
Yeah. Very high up there. Yeah.
Yeah. 12 o'clock. Here's a 7-foot release height. So this guy is like, I cannot wait to see what this looks like. It's going to be crazy, like due north arm slot, kind of like Oliver Drake, I would guess.
It gives me Marco Estrada when I did the comp, when I was thinking about him.
So that's interesting. And then, just like roughly, like here's spin rate and blah, 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 extension and all that stuff.
Fascinating.
But the first stuff I'm looking at, is some of how is this performing? So like here are stuff and results. I'm going to be looking at like the called strike whiff rate for some of these pitches individually. I'm going to be looking at the miss and chase for each of these pitches. And I've got Z lookups up here at the top of the screen so that I can filter, what is the MLB average miss and chase or swinging strike or whatever it is for each of these pitch types so that I can compare how each of these guys is kind of doing. Come back here and make sure that like our video is actually loading. Show you guys some more stuff in a second. And so like just looking at Kolar's pitches, which again, I'll like highlight here. These miss rates are like kind of whatever, a little bit below average across the board in terms of chase and miss. Some of the in zone whiff stuff is, it's like average. So nothing's sticking out really here other than how crazy high the release height was.
Yeah.
And how super funky, like due north it is. So now like back to Synergy. It's got the spray chart of like his pitches in the strike zone there. The fastballs are red. The cutters are going to be yellow. The curveballs are blue. Changeups are pink. And so I'll just look and see like, where is he getting swings and misses? So this is where it's a lot of fastballs in the zone, the red ones in the zone, even in the meat of the zone. So that's going to tell me, the angle of his stuff is probably pretty funky that he's sitting 90, but still getting all these in zone whiffs. Right.
Right.
So that's kind of interesting. And then I'll just put on the tape, I'll just kind of let that beautiful bean footage roll and take a look and off, the cuff here, guys, like just from what the numbers say so far, this guy would probably be at the end of the prospect list. He'd be like in the honorable mention section of the list. Okay. Where I mentioned that, hey, here's an interesting undrafted guy who got to the upper levels pretty quickly. And he's getting a lot of swing and miss with his fastball in the zone, considering it only sits 90, 91. He throws a ton of cutters. It's really probably just his fastball that has natural cut. It's probably not really a cutter. Unless we see something like obviously different here on the tape that would let us see that. That's interesting that he's got this curveball that kind of has that arm side tilt to it. That'll be useful against lefties. But, and short of going like super duper crazy here with, screen sharing, like, I would if I were going to break down Leo DeVries, like we'd spend 20, 30 minutes here sitting and like ridiculously. Right. But for a guy like this, let's, to write about a couple thousand players like I've got to do every year. I'm happy to have been given the name. And we'll write a quick, couple sentences on this guy as like a deep sleeper to follow. But yeah, the Padres list I haven't done yet. The west part of the valley here in Arizona is probably going to be towards the back of my run again.
Okay.
Once minor league spring training, I'm working on teams that train in the Gulf Coast of Florida now. And once I'm done with that is when I'll start working on the West Valley clubs. So we're probably like a couple weeks out of Padres list time. And that's when like the deep sleepers, guys who I, pop up on the backfields for me throughout March before camp breaks. That's when the guys like you asked about, Diego, that's when I'm going to have a better idea of who some of the guys who aren't on the top 30 yet, but are interesting names to know.
It's fascinating to see how you digest that information and are able to come up with these, rankings and listing that a lot of it has to do with what they're showing potentially wise. And is there anybody who stands out right now on the Padres list that's kind of unheralded at this point? Or is there anybody that you view as a sleeper, maybe that we haven't talked about yet? Just curious.
I really think that Bradley Rodriguez, if, there's just a chance he's up and is playing a high leverage bullpen role very quickly. There's guys who bump 101, 102. Like, I'm sure that a guy like that in your system is not under the radar for Padres fans who care enough about prospects to know, who Jared Kolar is. Like, you sure as hell know who Bradley Rodriguez is.
Yeah.
But in terms of, if I were talking about most baseball fans, though, the idea that Bradley Rodriguez is pitching high leverage innings for a team in a pennant chase at the end of the year, like, it would blow their minds to not know who he's 20-year-old guy who touches 101 or whatever. Right. People who like the Yankees, like you like the Padres, they don't know who Bradley is. Sure. David Morgan was throwing hard last fall, but it just wasn't playing the way I wanted it to. I still think Jagger Haynes is interesting, but
yeah, he is.
That's the other one where, like, please throw strikes, buddy. All the other stuff is there.
You took my question. I was about to ask about Jagger Haynes.
Yeah, it's just like, he didn't really pitch for so long that it feels okay that he wouldn't still be throwing strikes, but for things to have, plateaued and arguably backpedaled from 23 to 24, it's not a great sign, but if you're going to bet on someone to have late growth in an area, it's absolutely the guy who, like, got drafted during the pandemic year and then didn't pitch for, the better part of 3 more years after that. Like, of course, but also, like, guys for whom that is true tend not to pan out. Like, I'm not sitting here being like, hey, Brendan McKay, you did it, buddy. Like, you persevered and you did it. Like, no, his body just couldn't do it. It's not his fault or anyone's fault. It's just, like, wasn't in the cards for that guy and his body. And, it's just so true of so many guys. So many very talented guys over the course of me doing this now since 2016 full time. It's just been my job. Yeah. I've seen so many Alex Reyes's come and go, and so many Brendan McKays come and go. And
there's always players like, I mean, look at Michel Baez pitching in the Mexican League now. I mean, at one time he was hitting 98, 99, and the Padres thought they had a mid-rotation guy, and it just there's a lot of variables when it comes to ultimately succeeding in the major leagues.
Patino and Morejon and like, even Morejon's more on us. Morejon is more on those of us who weren't at the time properly understanding how his fastball couldn't really succeed to the level you thought it might because of how hard it was.
Yeah.
But Patino is just injuries. Maybe he got too physical too fast. I don't know. And Baez is just like, natural attrition that occurs at that position.
Right.
It's just is part of what I've done the last couple of years now, like, because I've been working at the site for as long as I have, like, enough time has passed from my 2017 top 100 and whatever to really look back and go, okay, here's where your eye was and wasn't correct. And in some of the learning from that is hard because, you just realize, why did I put 19-year-old, Yadier Alvarez on
That's
my
a
list?
name.
Why did I do that? And of course, like the answer is I saw him on the backfield. It was unbelievably sexy. And,
Right.
I didn't realize that over the course of 4 years, he just was never going to learn how to throw strikes, that he didn't really care. These
Yeah.
are things that you learn after the fact where it's like, oh, the team suspended him because of conduct detrimental to the team, just like not showing up basically. Like, these are things that you learn and you go, okay, you know who I like now? Will Warren. Who I like now is the guy who threw 140 innings last year and is like on the 40 man. I like Yaniel Curet. I like Chase McDermott. I like you've thrown 140 innings. Your stuff has held. You're there. You seem to care enough that the team keeps you around. And like, you have to be pretty special to be a teenage pitcher who I just want to like,
right.
You got to be Andrew Painter basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me to be like, okay, fine, I'm in. But at this point, it is just like, I've seen enough guys not hit. I've seen, Termar Johnson be like, pretty mid. After in high school, he looked like he was going to do, whatever Robbie Cano type stuff. And now it's just like, he's not good at anything. And here we are. And so, now I'm not that guy who's just like, let's put 20 guys who just got drafted on my top 100. Like, no.
Yeah.
Let's see how Connor Griffin hits, and let's see how, let's watch Zaire Hope hit against not
for sure
this low A ball.
I mean, Zaire Hope, that guy just emerged. I mean, the Cubs got to be kicking themselves for allowing the Dodgers to cherry pick him from them, but it is right.
And like, he's got serious juice. He does, like, and he might be Kyle Schwarber or whatever. There's a real chance, like, but also go look at Zaire Hope. Go find Zaire Hope in a spring training game 12 months ago. Screenshot that. And then screenshot what his body looks like now. He turned 20 a month ago. And so, like, just the way the trajectory he's on, like, he might be a DH. Yeah. He might be a DH, and he struck out a quarter of the time against low A pitching last year. But his power is enormous.
Right.
And it's just, and I totally like, I like Zaire Hope. And I like Connor Griffin, and I like Bryce Rayner, and I like, these high upside, but in terms of like, ranking the dudes across the minors completely, it's, Augustin Ramirez and Tehran Lorenzo, and, those guys are on or close to the 40 man or whatever it is. So, I'm just more happy to be on those guys now.
You don't have an easy job, my friend. You do it very well.
We applaud you for the job that you do.
Yeah, you do it very well. So don't kick yourself too bad, because I mean, there's variables with these guys that just are unforeseen. I mean, there's just nothing you can do about it.
Part of the reason, well, sure, and like, I know that I'm so thankful to have the job I do and be able to like put food on my own table just from watching sports all day. And the work really is like in the writing. You got to write whatever hundreds of thousands of words every calendar year, basically. But like, like, I just want folks to know that, like, I appreciate them coming to the site. I appreciate people who have a FanGraphs subscription and help us, our small but mighty site keep the lights on. And like, I gotta self-flagellate because, like, someone's got to keep me accountable so that I'm, not just taking for granted this amazing thing that I get to do for a living.
You do an excellent job, Eric, and now, as always, thank you for coming on the show. We appreciate your time and everything that you give towards baseball, because without someone like you, it would be hard to go through all these prospects and kind of make sense of it also.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I love San Diego sports fans. I think, it's amazing that what the interaction, the culture around the team since the Chargers have left town, it's so important that, that they're good. And as a guy who, the Coyotes left my backyard, and I have people close to me who our editor-in-chief, Meg Rowley, like, the Sonics got taken from her.
Right.
And it feels terrible. And, so I want good things for San Diego sports fans. And I think that means a kick-ass Padres team.
Thank you, man. We appreciate that because it is a team that's a city that's starved for a championship, and hopefully one day we'll get that. So,
Well,
as always, thank you for your time, Eric. Man, we'll let you get out of here. Appreciate your time. You can kind of fade back into the ivy like Homer Simpson's meme right now.
I just it's cut short, but yeah, it's like here I am. I'm at Wrigley.
That was just going through my mind as I'm sitting here watching you and talking to you. But again, Eric, we appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for your time. We'll talk to you again very soon, man. Have a good one.
Goodbye.
Diego, awesome stuff as usual. Go ahead and take us out of here. I don't think there's much more we can discuss Padre related.
No, I think we're pretty much all caught up. So that wraps up episode number 181 of the Padres EVT Podcast. Thank you all very much for watching. Go ahead and click like and subscribe down below so you can stay updated with the next episode. On behalf of Eric Longehagen from FanGraphs and East Village Times Editor-in-Chief James Clark, this is staff writer Diego Garcia, signing off. Have a great one, everyone.
Thanks, you guys.